everyone, ZMiner99 here, and welcome back for another YouTube video. I'm actually recording this intro after recording all of the actual clips for the video, just because I want to make sure that I put this out here, that this data of the ore generation that I'm going to talk about was collected by me, and it doesn't 100% reflect what is written in the code numerically, right? There's differences of like caves and stuff that the ore distribution charts that you may have seen won't necessarily actually account for. This data does account for it because there's not really another way of, doing trial data like this. These are the chunks in order, well, reverse order. That's the 10th one. This one here was the first. That is a test. This is the first one, I believe. And then I just went that way with it. So, yeah. It turned out to be really interesting. And, yeah. So, anyways, I will let the rest of the video explain. But just remember, I'm not saying that anything that someone else has put out is wrong. I don't have enough data to say that, and I don't think that that's what getting more data would show. So enjoy as well. But basically what I do, and I'll walk you through the process, is I dig out a chunk, not manually. That would be horrible. But not manually, but using commands. So if I start here, and we do this one, for example, I want to go slash, and then fill is the command you use. Just enter in the one position there. Do the same thing here. And then you get your two locations. And we want to replace, say, gravel. Because that's a gravity block. It'll screw stuff up. And we want to replace with air. Wait. No, it's not that way. It's the other way. We want to. Yeah. We want to replace the gravel with the air. And then we set our bounds. So I'm going to start at 0 and go all the way to level 100. Hit enter. All the gravel has now been filled with air. And then you just do that. So if I say dirt, and then I say grass. Actually, I didn't need grass. Grass block. There we go. That's the one. Then I say, well, looks like there's stone, right? There's definitely going to be stone. Stone. And then I say granite. All right. And we're going to actually turn off that texture pack. It's Mizuno's, by the way. There's the credit for using it for the little bit that we did. This is your normal Minecraft textures now. And we need to get rid of the diorite. And looks like there's some andesite. Oh, bedrock. And that is it. So it's actually a lot fewer commands to clear out the bottom of the world than the top. For sure. But you can see, we got that little clump of diamonds there, little clump of diamonds here. There's actually diamonds all the way up here as well. Are there anything higher? So I think, budding amethyst. We didn't do that, but there's only 2 of those. So those are easy to break. I'm not counting the amethyst in the ore collection thing. Okay. Yeah, look, the tallest one here, the highest one up is copper, second is lapis. This is how high up. I mean, I think lapis can generate higher than that, but yeah. So, I'm going to uh, show you guys the spreadsheet that we use now. All right, so now that we're back in the world, I'm just gonna throw that out. I don't really need it. That was weird. It looks like it caught and then it disappeared down the rest of the way. So what I do is I come and I'll do one at a time. I tried just as I went down, like switching pages and stuff. That ended up taking longer than doing all of one type at once. So in F3, over on the right, there's the target block information. And this one's at 65. There's 4 copper at this level, none other around. And then usually I use my second screen, but since I'm recording, I'm just going to do it this way. That was what, 65? 65, yes. So we go to 65, and this is in number 3, and we go 4. There we go. And then we want to go back to Minecraft. Break the ones that we count, so we make sure we don't count them again. And then the next one down is 64. So, and there's 4 in that one. And then we just keep going, looking for more copper, find more copper. Okay, there's 2 at this level, which is 54. 4, 2. And then there's 2 at 53. Oh, that was the wrong one. There's 1 there. There's no anywhere else. So 1 at 52. And then we're at 49, and there's 4. So this is kind of just the process I'm going through. And I'm going to finish this process. I don't know if all 10 are going to be done. I hope to at least have 5 done by the end of this episode, though. Or video. Don't know if it's really an episode. But video. 5 there. And it's a pretty tedious task, which is why I'm not really sure if I'm gonna finish all of these or not, because I don't want to delay a video coming out because of this. So anyways, I'll just keep working on that, and once I'm done with a couple more chunks, I will be back. All right, so we're back, and I have something up on my screen. This was actually posted way back when 1.18 came out, 1.18 came out, by one of the developers of Minecraft, but I guess it never actually got posted. At least I never saw anything from Minecraft, on their Twitter about it. But this is the only one I could find of an actual ore distribution chart for how the ore is generated in the game right now. So this is Henrik Kinberg. Yeah, no, Nieberg? I'm horrible with names like this. But anyways, this is from his Twitter, and you see the ore distributions here. Iron gets more up in the mountains. We didn't, our study, or the one I did, focuses mainly 64 and then down to bedrock, right? Or yeah, 64 to bedrock mainly is where mine focuses. Emeralds, I didn't actually look for emeralds at all. We didn't do any of the special biome anythings other than there was a stony beach, but I think that's, according to this, it looks like that just falls under normal distribution of coal whenever you have a lot in a stony beach. There was only a couple of the chunks that were in a stony beach. But I was like, hey, why not we see how well the data we got lines up with this? So if I go here and then I go here and we do some split screening, we can see coal. So kind of have to rotate this on its side, right? We see that. So this says the lowest coal that we found was at 3, Y level 3. Well, look, there's not much coal down there. This says the peak is about here. Not that I can see where that is. If we go, okay, zooming in isn't going to actually do anything. That's fine. Let's see if we can open this in a new tab. Again, this is not a chart that I made. This is what someone else made. If we zoom in, it is 96 is where this says it peaks. According to what I got from In the World, it looks like it's actually at 70 or at 57 is where it peaks in the distribution that I found. Yeah, 57. But, it doesn't trail off, It's actually fairly symmetrical around it, it looks like. Not decreasing so sharply up here. But the other point is with that, I wasn't really in places where there was a lot of generation in these areas either, so that also explains some of the lower coal values as well. If we go and we look at copper, then it looks like our peak for copper was at 52. Their peak for copper is at 48. So not that far off, really. That's pretty good. And then we definitely do see the decline as it gets lower and lower in the world. But it looks like it's just less distributed. There wasn't a lot of places where it would stack on top of each other to make really big peaks, really obvious ones. But you can kind of see the curvature until you see this. Though this can be explained by the large copper veins that you have between the peak, like the triangular shaped peak, and then 0 can be explained by those veins. So that can be some of why this area is more flat instead of actually like tapering off like this part would suggest here. If we go to iron, we got a peak, a pretty obvious peak at 19, but then it's also kind of flat over here. But again, this flat area here can be explained, well, partly by this part of the generation, but also the large iron veins below where this curve leaves off as well. So this says it peaks at 16, at Y level 16. Our peak was at 19. Again, not far off of 16, but if we actually go to where 16 was, that's almost a low, like, in the middle of all the data, so that is confusing. There's a discontinuity here, which I would have expected to have gone away at like -4, I believe it is. I would expect to at least found one iron there, but there was none there during any of the 10. Obviously, that's just something with... This is kind of a meta heuristics, what I did, trying to extrapolate the original based off of the data that I'm getting, right? Obviously, these are piecewise functions, basically, that are getting put together. You have, a peak here, right? but then, or in copper, but then there's also this ore vein thing, which makes it more complicated. Iron's even more complicated than that. You have this, like a step function here, and then there's a ramp here, right? Two ramps, and then there's this other function there. So that's why whenever you look at the data like this, it can look a little confusing. Whenever you look at, oh, look, there was these and, all this other stuff going on here. I'm just amazed I didn't find more iron lower down. There weren't many iron veins, I guess, that occurred low in where I tested at. Redstone, smaller range, starts at 12, ends at the bottom of the world. And ours, this shows that the peak generation is at the very bottom. This says it's not. Bedrock will generate anywhere between, 64 is completely bedrock. 60 is, I believe, the top layer of bedrock. So that's where you would expect to see the numbers start to drop off, because bedrock generation would be overriding the ore generation, right? But it's actually looking like the peak from where I was collecting data is actually negative 54, which isn't too unreasonable. That's right here. So that makes sense. Yeah, it's just I would expect it to have been lower, right? And then, of course, there's, again, you have the piecewise function. There's this step, and then there's the ramp here. And then the step explains all this, right, up till here. The negative 32, we kind of start to see this trend, this general trend going up. Gold is over in this corner. Reduced in air exposure, right? So that's the triangle here. And we kind of see the triangle there, but so it says the max is 32. We didn't find anything at 32. Highest was actually at 23. And then, all the way down at the bottom where we found it too. So this is pretty obvious right here. Between 48 and the bottom, we have this kind of flatter area. It's odd that it does kind of go up a little bit though. But the gold doesn't really have that much to support this in the actual study that we did, which is interesting. This says it should be peaking at negative 16. Negative 16 was really not a peak. I would say, like, this is the highest, or there's two highest peaks. I would definitely say that this one here at negative 42 is actually the highest, which doesn't make any sense because that's before this, or according to this chart, because that's before this little bar kicks in, and that's right here. It's actually like not supposed to be high at all. So this is one of those things where it's like, this tells you one thing, right? This chart, which is what the computer's thinking, right? But this is how it ends up, where it's like you actually have this other peak, not as significant as this one. There's not like a few layers that have all of it. Because really, when you're doing branch mining, you're looking at 4 different layers, right? There's one above you, one where you're at, one below you, or one at your feet, and then one below you. And all 4 of those you can find blocks in, right? So really, this would be the better spot to look from this data for gold. If you want it to, look in the negative 16 area, well, negative 16, I actually didn't find any gold at negative 16, because this is for negative 15 right next to is negative 16. So, the data says there isn't gold at negative 16, even though that's not true, right? There is gold there. I found it there in the past. It's just gold doesn't generate a ton, so you need more chunks than just the 10, I'm guessing, to get something which would better represent it. This chart here. If we want to go to lapis, this is our lapis here. You have this nice solid generation here. It's just this, it'll kind of just go at a fairly standard frequency, and we definitely see that reflected very well on this chart. You know, pretty flat all the way across, and then there's this peak here at around 0, which is exactly what this says there is. So I'd say that the lapis seems to line up pretty well with the chart, as well as, what was it, the iron that lined up fairly well, and copper. See, I'd say copper lined up decently well. Coal, you know, it's hard because there's not really generation that I looked into up here. And then there's iron, and then there's, you know, so those ones make sense. I'd say the shakiest one, definitely the redstone, because we didn't see the peak of it being right above bedrock like I would have expected it to be. Gold, kind of hard to tell. Doesn't really make sense because there's actually a pretty strong peak right here, which is on the downswing of things. Lapis lines up fairly well. Now let's look at diamond, right? This is probably the one that most people are the most interested in. Turned out to be the rarest block. Not that much of a surprise in the study. So looks like our maximum is that line there. So that's 16 according to this chart. That lines up. We didn't actually find anything above 4 for diamond. Reducing air exposure, we just cleared out all the materials, so you know that wasn't too big of a hindrance for our study. But you know, again, this says it should be the highest at the bottom of the world. Well, that's not what this shows, right? What I found shows it at -38 is the highest. I mean, we had, what, 2 good veins, you know, 3 good veins there at that -38 value. But I would expect there to be more distribution around this -55 at least. Because again, bedrock doesn't start till here. It should be, the peak of the diamonds should have been right here. But it's actually a lot better distributed up here than it is down here, which I find strange, like really strange. And that's why I'm like, again, you know, really, you probably, to get a good curve that doesn't have all these discontinuities in it, right? Because each of the discontinuities basically means that you, like, we know it is able to generate in this range, for example, right? But we didn't get anything, which means that we need to do more trials, basically, to make sure all these discontinuities in the chart are filled. You know, stuff off the tail, it's like, okay, well, that's never going to get generated in, maybe, right? We know this bottom one isn't, because that's the bottom layer of bedrock, which is solid bedrock. But, you know, 63, we might be able to get some there, but the more important part when you're looking at data, is, like what we're doing, is these gaps, and I just don't have the time to go and fill all these gaps. I'm almost certain that if all these gaps got filled up, we would get data that better matched what this chart here shows. Like certain that we would. But again, I don't have a ton of time for that, so that didn't happen. I might add to this, do like one a weekend or something. But, you know, we only had 171 total diamond, 2 of which were above 0, Y level 0, and then the, you know, majority were below. Lapis was actually pretty even split between the 2 levels, which makes sense based off of the areas distributed in that chart. But, you know, it matched better, but what do we see? We have this 238 blocks, and there still is a decent number of gaps, but it still ended up matching decently with what that chart shows. this is actually a real important point in data analysis in general, right? Fewer hits, right? The fewer data entries that we have, we got more gaps. This is gold, especially up at the top here. And it doesn't match up as well, right? We have this hot spot here, but the the chart says that the hot spot should be in this area instead. So Redstone, we had 400 hits, right? 400 data points, basically. And this lined up, it was getting closer, right? But we still had all these gaps. So there's stuff we're missing, is basically what the gaps mean. We didn't do enough data collection to fill them. Iron, we had 801. And there's still a lot of gaps, even in the iron data, But we did get a much better match. This is pretty close to what it said, because this is where the maximum was said to be. This is where our maximum was. So that's pretty close. And then copper, we had 926 total ore that we found. And, again, it lined up better, right? Our maximum was here. The maximum that is shown is here. Not that far off, right? Not a ton of gaps in the copper data either. There's no copper below here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 discontinuities in the data collected for the copper, and they're all only one layer. Unlike iron, where you got, big swaths of layers that are unaccounted for, basically. Coal distribution, 1097. So this is like where I say, like, okay, this sounds like a really good number for data points when you're looking at it, but look, we're still missing, a gap here, right? Big gap here. This says that coal isn't as evenly distributed, probably, as the copper is, which from the chart, coal does have this much larger area. It shows there's, more stuff like that. So yeah, but again, it's much better than something like the iron, where you just scroll through it and there's discontinuities everywhere at both ends. Redstone, there's not too many discontinuities, but there's also fewer total sample points. Gold, there's a decent number of discontinuities in the gold one. Lapis, it's pretty discontinuous. Diamond has some pretty big discontinuities. So, when you're looking at data, basically, I'm not saying that this is saying this is what you will 100% find. This is what I found, and I'm pretty sure that this is, accurate, right? I feel like this is probably better than this chart, in all honesty, just because this chart is saying, okay, if there is stone, what is the chance of that being replaced? Stone or deep slate, right? Or andesite or diorite, or, those other blocks. Anything that can be overridden by stone, right? By an ore block. This is what it's going to, like, the chance that it's going to get overwritten by the ore. So it's not, it's just interesting how it works and stuff. But that is going to be it. This has been a long analysis video of the ore distribution. But again, this isn't final data. Obviously, this doesn't match up what the chart is, and it's not pure enough to say that this chart's wrong. So I'm assuming this chart is right and is what's written in the code. I don't think there's any reason they'd put what isn't written, something not written in the code, in this chart. But as far as what is actually found in the game, obviously this isn't conclusive either, because there's not a lot of data, especially when you go to the diamonds and stuff. But this is what I found, and it'd be interesting to see how well these line up with what you're actually going to find in the game whenever you go into the game and play it. So I think I might, do some testing with that too. Be like, okay, so I find this many diamonds mining this many blocks down at Bedrock. Well, how many diamonds am I going to find if I mine at negative 34, right? Over the same distance of chunks. Um, I just think that'd be an interesting thing to study. Or even here, if I go to negative 55 instead of where I usually go, which is negative 58, if I mine the layer above it, basically. Am I going to find more or am I going to find less or what? So I just think it's interesting. Food for thought, basically. Um, Again, I'm not going to say that they're wrong, because I don't think that chart is wrong. But anyways, thank you for watching. Sorry for the 2-week delay on videos, but I am hoping to do a normal Let's Play video soon. I just really wanted to get this one done because I was going through it and finding it was really interesting that doesn't really make sense with how I usually think of ore generation working. There's a lot of little peaks, is what this is kind of saying. Again, does that really mean anything? I don't know. We'll find out. I do plan on continuing to add to this data, though, because it will be interesting to see what it comes back with.